Hello everyone, this is Husker Eurocat welcoming you to the 2021 off-season video as part of the New York Jets franchise on Madden 20 for the PC. The Jets have successfully finished off the 2020 season with a Super Bowl win in Miami against the New Orleans Saints. Now begins the process of seeing whether or not they can retain the team they won a Super Bowl with. Let's take a look at how the teams fared in the 2020 season. We know the Jets had home games through the playoffs because Houston defeated Cleveland in the division round on the AFC side, but this is a first in a long history of playoff camping. The Patriots didn't make it this season, just missing a wild card spot, getting beat out by the Texans with the same record. The Steelers were at the bottom of the North, which we haven't seen in a while, and bringing up the bottom of the AFC were the Dolphins with a 2-10 record. The NFC is where the real drama was, though. Aside from the Saints, the rest of the teams were tied. But the Panthers, since they tied one game with the Giants, who happened to win the East with an 8-7-1 record, definitely a lot of teams in the hunt for the playoffs until the final bell. Looking at a few stats for the season, the best offense in the league was the Baltimore Ravens with over 6,100 yards this last season. The Jets came in at number 9 with just under 5,500 yards. I thought it was interesting that just because New York wasn't the best offense in the NFL didn't mean they couldn't get the job done. If you look back at the Ravens, they had the best offense in the league and didn't even make the playoffs. So go figure. Then in the NFC, we see the Saints at number 1 and going to the Super Bowl with it. Just makes you go, But look at the Giants and the Cowboys in 3rd and 4th place, but the Giants getting to move on to the playoffs. Just goes to show you that winning is the name of the game, and leading the stat categories doesn't always reflect the bigger picture. The Chargers take home the passing lead for the AFC, so Phillip Rivers still could get that part of the game going. And the Jets came in at number 12 in the AFC as far as the passing was concerned, which wasn't their strong suit, but come on, 12th place? Egads. The leaders in the NFC were the Panthers, and with Cam Newton at the helm, it isn't too hard to envision. Now comes the rushing offense, and that is quite a surprise to me. In the AFC, we have Houston on top. From a perspective that Kareem Hunt had that one play for 98 yards, I understand it. From a perspective that New York only allowed 21 yards the rest of the game, makes it hard to believe that they're at the top of the heap. Either that or I'm completely undervaluing the Jets defense. And there's the Jets in 5th position, and that is quite understandable with the good games that Bell had during the season. I like that the Broncos were up there in the standings as well. I remember that we had a really tough time stopping Lindsey running all over the top of us. And the Cowboys take the category, not by much. And if you had Zeke in the backfield, you'd probably take Tom Bonners in that arena as well. And now for the defensive stats, and say hello to the number 1 defense in the NFL with the New York Jets. Like I said before, it's going to be really interesting to see if this group can be kept together, because the Jets organization can thank this group for getting them the Vince Lombardi Trophy. The number 1 pass defense was headlined by Jamal Adams, and I do have to say that even when he was out injured and they relied on Darryl Roberts to play in his spot, he did a pretty fine job. The Browns came in at number 2, and hopefully next season the Jets will get the chance to get a little revenge on the Browns. Remember, they played in a Monday night game in week number 5 and gave New York their first loss of the season in an overtime game 19-16. The offense had a hard time getting momentum in that game, which helps me understand the second place finish of the pass defense. The Broncos take the number 1 spot in the AFC for rush defense, and since the Jets could only put up 29 yards on the ground against those guys, that is understandable. The Jets weren't too far off behind in third place, so Quinnen and Leonard Williams did a pretty fair job as well. What's next kind of makes me scratch my head a little. The Cowboys had the number 1 rush offense and the number 1 pass defense. Somewhere along the line, you'd think that they would be able to make the playoffs, but no. Beaten out by the 8-7-1 Giants for the NFC East. The rush defense is captured by the Panthers, and at least they made it to the postseason. The Jets also topped the quarterback sack category, as well as the caused fumble category due to one Jamal Adams. He was a one-man wrecking crew that almost doubled the number of caused fumbles that the Jets had over the next 2 teams combined. I know that he had to be given a big, long contract to remain a Jet, but I can't help think that it's going to pay off in the end. Now on to some individual stats for this season. For overall passing yards, Darnold landed in the 4th position, securing a top 5 spot with just over 4,300 yards. I do have to say that as a longtime player of Madden 08 for the PC, I was pleasantly surprised to see him play an entire season. So EA must have been able to fix that bug, because all of the season that I played on that format, I don't remember going through a season without my starting quarterback getting hurt at least once. Thus, you normally had to keep a pretty good backup on the roster just in case. Now, touchdowns, he was pretty fair down the list at 25 with 25 passing touchdowns. But this was extraordinary, I thought. The quarterback with the most interceptions in the league takes his team to the Super Bowl and wins the thing. He had 26 interceptions to 25 touchdowns, and sadly, that's partly due to my passing at the wrong times, and I really need to learn to throw the ball away. Phillip Rivers threw 24 interceptions, but he threw 37 touchdowns to go with those picks. Not a good ratio, but much better than I did with Darnold. His completion percentage was only at 56%, and that needs to get better in the seasons to come. Of the active quarterbacks, Cam had the best average at 76%, so the bar is set. As far as our running backs, Le'Veon Bell was the number 4 back in the league with almost 1,300 yards on the season. But if you'll notice, he carried the ball a lot more than the 3 backs ahead of him. And I was under the impression that Darnold didn't feed him the ball enough. Maybe he did, and his per carry average just needs to get a little bit better. I'm sure that will get better with time, since the very young O-line will only improve with time. He only had 2 fumbles in almost 300 touches, so his ability to hang on to the ball is not an issue. His yards after contact is where he shines, though. Almost 75 yards more than Alvin Kamara, earning Bell the top spot. When it comes to the receivers, Emmanuel Sanders from Denver had the most yardage, and the Jets keep a top 10 wideout with Jamison Crowder coming in at number 9, getting his 1,000-yard season with 1,086. That's where the good news ends, however. His other scores just need some work if he's to be an elite receiver like Robbie Anderson was becoming. Speaking of Robbie Anderson, 2 seasons ago with the Jets, he won Receiver of the Year honors and now is the number 3 wideout on the Colts roster. If he just would have been a little more cooperative in his negotiations with the Jets, he still could be that elite receiver. As a last note, Bell had 307 receiving yards that most likely would be the envy of some wideouts in the league, but that brings his all-purpose yards over 1,500 for the season at 1,592. All considered a pretty good season for the veteran halfback. When it comes to the O-line's performance, I certainly hope that Jack Willig can turn things around a bit. He gave up the most sacks of any lineman in the NFL this last season, and some improvement is needed or the search may be on. Moving on to the defense, Jake Ryan from the Jaguars recorded the most tackles. Avery Williamson records 131 tackles to stay in the top 5, and the next Jet on the list is Blake Cashman. He was a valuable asset this last season and did a lot of sub work, and I look forward to seeing a lot more of this young man out of Minnesota. Joey Bosa topped the tackle for loss category, and I can vouch for his tenacity on the field. When we played the Chargers in Week 16, he had a constant presence that you had to be aware of. Avery Williamson took this category for the Jets, and while C.J. Mosley is good, it's Williamson that seems to be doing the lion's share of the work. Whether it's just that Mosley is drawing more attention and not getting in on the plays, it's definitely affecting his numbers. And if it wouldn't cost the Jets $26 million to get out of it, I would say trade him in favor of younger talent, like the aforementioned Blake Cashman. The sack leader is Aaron Donald, and interceptions were led by Aaron Colvin and Bradley Roby with 6 on the season. Now, pass deflections is where you can see the number 1 pass defense come alive. 3 of the top 4 are Jets, with 4 of the top 10 belonging to the Jets. It's not hard to see why New York was number 1 in pass defense. In the kicking game, Eddie Pinedo came on strong at the end of the season, but hitting on only 78% of his field goals and missing 14% of his extra points. Is his job in jeopardy? I'm not sure. There has been some talk of getting Daniel Carlson released by the Lions, but that remains to be seen. Corey Vedvik had an outstanding season, not the longest average per kick, but far outshined anyone else when dropping the ball inside the 20. I didn't think Carl Arsenault had that good of a kick return game until I saw his number 1 ranking in return yardage average. Doesn't hurt to be the best in the business, I guess. The Jets will have a tough choice in front of them because he's not so bad at being a wideout either. So now comes the fun of seeing who New York re-signed and who they let go to test free agency. Due to a few high-dollar contracts, the Jets only had $11 million of cap space to work with going into the offseason, so it was quite interesting to see how they handled having no money to work with. First up was the speedy Jakeem Grant. He earned a spot as a starter, but he's getting to the point that giving him a long deal is out of the question due to his age. But the Jets strike a deal for $8.5 million over the next 2 years, and to preserve a little room in cap money, the rest had to be let go. Some would have been good backups, but I don't believe they would have made the first string, so it wasn't the worst loss in the world. They definitely didn't keep the Super Bowl squad intact for next season, though. Now it's on to free agency to see what the Jets can do with $6.9 million in cap room. Not much, I would say. Headlining this free agent class was Deshaun Watson at $236 million over 7 years. That's incredible that he wants that kind of money. Ugh. I feel for the team that pays that bill, I'll tell you. But obviously, New York can barely afford backups and not top-tier players. So they try to strike a deal with a left outside linebacker, Duke Riley. They dropped the offer to $4.8 million over 2 seasons for the fifth-year linebacker out of LSU. A 79-point offer. And next is left end Vernon Butler Jr. out of Louisiana Tech. That's offered a 1-year deal, $1.95 million. And lastly, we have right outside linebacker Elijah Lee out of Kansas State. 25 years old and a star developer, he might just have a shot at being at least a really good backup, and maybe even better. I don't know. And all three accept the offered contracts and are now New York Jets. It looks like the Patriots took Watson at a healthy sum of $116 million over the course of 7 years. The bulk will be made in the first 5 seasons, but wow, I guess the Pats needed a good quarterback with the GOAT retiring from the game. Now the Jets will get to face Watson twice a season, not counting any playoff games that may come their way. This could be fun. The NFL draft was up next, and it was an agonizing wait as good players seemed to be flying off the draft board for the Jets. At pick number 5, the Falcons take right end Pearson Duncan, who happened to be the best player in the draft this year. Looking to get a good defensive end as well, the Jets select Harvey Gabriel out of Western Michigan. Definitely a strong end and a power rusher at that. I was under the impression that New York wanted a speed rusher, but he ended up being a 72 overall with normal development and 19th in true talent, and a good pick for the Jets. Strength and acceleration off the line are his strengths, and he can hit hard. So if he's anything like Jamal Adams, he'll do just fine. Wanting to add a little more talent to the middle of the defense, New York selects right outside linebacker Terrell Briscoe out of East Carolina. Labeled a good pick and a leader on the team, he has a balanced approach to his game and a strip ball mentality. Again, if he's anything like Jamal Adams in the fumble category, go get him, Terrell. First order of business, though, I don't think Quinnen Williams is going to let him keep that jersey number, do you? With the 32nd pick in the 3rd round, the Jets select Jose Westbrook, defensive tackle out of Auburn, to stay with the defensive scheme. They may have picked him up a round or 2 early because he was right on the money as far as a good pick, but is only a 66 overall with normal development. He was the 3rd overall defensive tackle in the 20-yard shuttle, 3-cone, and vertical jump, so maybe he'll be more than just a practice squad player. Then at the tail end of the 4th round, they select a left end Bradley Adams, and they reached with him. A 61 overall power rusher out of Washington State, most likely destined for the practice squad. Not seeing anyone that they really wanted to take in the 5th round, the Jets traded that pick to the Indianapolis Colts for a 4th round choice in next year's class. With their 6th round selection, the Jets find a halfback they hope will be a gem, and he ends up being a 60 overall but has hidden development. He's got some good utility back and blocking skills, so maybe fullback isn't out of the picture for him. With that hidden development, we'll see how fast he can progress. New York traded their 7th round pick for a 6th round pick next year, so that brings the NFL draft to a close. Now comes the search for undrafted free agents, and during that search, along with a couple of UDFAs, the Jets found that John Ross III has gone unsigned. He's a free agent, and make that acquisition for the upcoming season. The hope is that his speed will at least be useful in the return game, if not as a bona fide wideout. Now the Jets are ready for the 2021 preseason, and this is the roster that they'll be taking into those games. New York seems to be pretty light at a few positions, and some jockeying during preseason is just what they need. Notably are positions like halfback, with the top spots pretty much locked if something doesn't happen during preseason. Rookie halfback Kevin Young has been moved to the fullback spot, as was noted earlier, since his overall goes up dramatically with the change. So that's why the halfback spot is quite light at the moment. A deep position for the Jets is at wide receiver, with 10 wideouts to evaluate. The O-line is another area that the Jets are pretty lean at, so this could get rather intense if they encounter any injuries to the players. As noted earlier, New York is just about at the salary cap limit and have no room for acquisitions unless they do some releasing and trading. I don't know. Some solid talent might be sacrificed. The other area that has been modified is in the kicking game. Eddie Pinedo has been released, and the Jets have contracted Daniel Carlson as was expected. He has about the same accuracy, but is a little stronger than Pinedo, so I'm not sure how that'll work out. We'll have to find out here in preseason. The plan was to keep both on the roster going through the preseason, but the Jets are battling salary cap issues, and keeping them both, well, that just wasn't an option. The preseason schedule hasn't changed from last season, or the season before that for that matter. Does EA know that every preseason your teams play the same schedule? Or maybe they just don't care. Not sure. Does anyone know of a mod where we can change that from happening? It would make preseason so much more realistic. We'll have the Titans and Packers at home, followed by the Cowboys and the Chiefs on the road. Next up, we'll have that preseason video, and I'm going to try to condense all 4 games down into one video so that preseason doesn't take so long. But there are a lot of things to look at in preseason, even if the Jets haven't been able to put together a full 75-man preseason roster. We need to keep an eye on some key positions, such as wide receiver, that New York is quite deep at, and if that's deemed necessary, could there be some deep cuts at that position to make room in other areas? The O-line comes to mind, and definitely the halfback spot as well. We'll also make the preseason cuts, and by the end of the video, we'll have the roster that the Jets will try to use to repeat as Super Bowl champs. We'll be starting out at home in the dark, well, at night anyway. And until I see you back in MetLife Stadium for the Jets and Titans, this is Husker Eurocat saying so long for now, and have a good day, everyone.